Testing, 1 2 1 2, testing 1 2 1 2. Greetings, everyone. And yet again, this time it's episode 23 with a big question, a controversial question. Why haven't we nuked Beijing? Wow, big question. And considering what's been happening, what continues to happen, it's pretty wild that we're still at peace, because a lot of people have died as a result of action by the Chinese. So let's get going with why I'm asking this question. So let's go with this one right here, which is a quick question, or actually a quick let you know, and that is that a friend of mine who's from Lebanon originally, and also a reader and speaker of Arabic, let me know about this, and it's very interesting that the Hezbollah, the leader Nasrallah, has actually been in negotiations with China. It's actually this triad that's come about, which is the China, or specifically the CCP, China's communist, the Chinese Communist Party, Iran, and Venezuela have decided to help out Hezbollah and come in to aid Lebanon with regards to its banking system. And this is something I didn't really understand, or really hadn't thought about, and that is the idea that Lebanon, Beirut, is actually the Middle Eastern equivalent of the Switzerland with regards to banking. And on one level, it's actually retained the secrecy of what used to be in Switzerland, which is actually one of the reasons that you have a variety of organizations who keep their money in Lebanon. But the thing that's happened by Trump having these actions against Lebanon, banking actions, has caused the Lebanese pound to drop rapidly. So people who've been hiding their money in Lebanon, the way they previously used to hide their money in the Caribbean and also Switzerland, have suddenly noticed the fall and drop of their the value of their currency. So this is going to have some very interesting experience or responses in the future as China tries to take over on this debt, or to support the value of the Lebanese currency. And by doing so, they're going to be recreating everything they've been doing around the world, which is they've learned how to use economics in order to basically conquer a nation. You've seen this in the former Republic of Rhodesia that became Zimbabwe. And you've also seen this in South America and what's been happening in South America with regards to how China has been trying to take out resources from a variety of countries. We've also seen what's been happening, how they've taken advantage of the scenario where we basically spilled our blood, spent our money in Afghanistan, and China's the one that's come in and taken all the resources through mining concessions in Afghanistan. So, looking at that. But before that, I wanted to do a quick shameless plug for my friend Daryl Wong over in Hawaii. And basically, I just got this spear gun. And why am I going to be talking about a spear gun? I'm not going to be talking about the spear gun in this episode, but I will be talking about it later. And this is a 6-foot spear gun, and I'll be using this locally here in Alaska. And you see that beautifully written, Daryl Wong Spear Guns out of Honolulu. And why would I be talking about this spear gun? because I'll be talking later about why I moved back to Alaska 8 years ago and why a spear gun would be so important to you if you live on the coast, i.e., making sure that you have food in your freezer and making sure that you're able to get food on the table because of things that will be coming up. So here we go with the rest of the story that I'll be talking further about, which is why have we not nuked Beijing? And why would I be saying, why would that even be a question of why we would or would not be nuking Beijing? Big question. So, here's questions I'd like you to ask, because that's what these new episodes are all about. It's just to get you to ask questions. And hopefully, you'll be asking more questions, and I'll have time to be able to ask you questions. I mean, I have been running pretty long on these episodes because there's just so much information for me to get to you. And here are the kinds of questions I'm asking. It's just like, ask yourself these questions as we go through the course, through the episode today, and that is, who's benefiting from the U.S. nationalism in disarray? Why? Who would be benefiting within the United States and outside of the United States of the attacks on U.S. nationalism and actually nationalism all around the world? What's the problem with you being proud about where you come from, the country that has given you safety and shelter and food? Why would you be ashamed that you're from a certain country? Why would you not be proud that you're from a certain country, depending on what country that is? And then here's another question. Who benefits from a one world, one government system? I mean, this seems to be the dream for those who would call themselves the globalists. That's what they want. Why do they want that? And who has benefited from a global economy for the last 70 years? I can tell you flat out who's been benefiting the most. Large international corporations. And how do they benefit? And who are these large corporations? Well, right off the top of my head, I can give you quite a few. Let's say Apple. Apple is an international corporation. Microsoft is an international corporation. And how do they benefit? They benefit by getting basically cheap slave labor in foreign countries like China, India, and then they bring back their product line over to, Nike. That's another one too. But Nike, have you noticed how all these companies who are anti-American and anti-nationalism in the United States and are always jumping on how they can use their megaphone to reach out, then they can definitely afford a very big megaphone to reach out to the populace, trying to use their propaganda in order to keep us going towards a one world, one government system, where they benefit from it. Because if you have wars and independent, and this is the thing in nationalism, because they're forgetting the fact that humans are tribal people. We're all tribal people. And if you have a question about that, who do you defer to? Do you defer to the leadership of your country automatically? Or do you defer to your closest friend? Do you defer to your family? When you work in a tribal system, which humans normally do, we defer to those who are closest and we work our way out. It's kind of like even in the Marine Corps. They talk about in the Marine Corps, who do you defer for first? You defer to a Marine, and then from the Marines goes out to the Navy, and from the Navy goes out to the commanders of the military, and then from the commanders out to the president. Okay? And when it all comes down to it, actually comes down to the U.S. Constitution. We're going to talk about the U.S. Constitution and the idea of center of gravity. That'll be very interesting to talk about. And then who's benefited from the U.S. sending millions of dollars of economic development aid to China? Think about that. And how have they been benefiting from it? And I'm not talking just about the Chinese and the CCP specifically who benefited from this, but who are the politicians within our own country, whether that might be your country of the UK, or it might be the United States, or any other country that has been aiding in the sending of money to China. And specifically, when I say China, it's the CCP, because I'm making a big difference between what I consider free China, which is Taiwan, in contrast to the CCP. Because in the CCP right now, and I used to say Hong Kong too, but you can't say that about Hong Kong anymore, can you? They basically ignored that agreement, that contract with the Hong Kongese that was designed way back with the British. So, and let's look at what's happened. We've got how many deaths? 120,210 deaths in the United States alone. How many deaths occurred in Vietnam? A full-on war. Yeah, 58. 58,318. Okay. So you've got these amount of deaths, and they say, well, it's a disease. It's just a disease that escaped from a lab. And they were just trying to find a cure for who knows what. Some people say they were trying to find a cure for AIDS. Some people say that they're trying to find a cure for SARS coronavirus. It's all ambiguous. It just keeps on coming back and forth, ambiguous responses as to how many people have died, how many people are going to die in the future. Like what today it's 442 in the U.S. according to these stats right here. That was from today, June 19th. So I want to go back and give you a little bit of my background. What's my background? My background goes all the way back to Southeast Asia. My first memories of life are in Vietnam. My first memories of life that I emotionally were affected, that they stick in my mind, are actually the Tet Offensive of 1968. We first got back to Southeast Asia and lived in Singapore for about 6 months in 1967. And the reason was because there was no housing available for American dependents of those who are working or in service in the United States who are able to bring their family to Vietnam. And they'd be wondering, why would people bring their family to Vietnam when there's a full-on war going on there? Great question. I've asked my dad that, and if you want to read my book, The Bamboo Chest, I write about what his response was to that. But hey, so my first schooling in Vietnam was at the French Catholic school that I was interned at. I was actually enrolled in. And you can see me right there. I'm one of the white guys there. Yeah. So being a minority, I know what it's like to be a minority. Yeah. So we like to make this thing a race thing in the country and in the world right now. But you got to wonder why. Who is benefiting from that? Just like in the questions I've been asking, who is truly benefiting from that? Because the African American in the United States or anybody of color around the world, they're not benefiting from it. All this is just creating actually more contrast and more conflict, because the ones who are actually pushing this seems to be, let's say, BLM. BLM, well, you know what? Who sponsors and pays for BLM? That's the Open Society organization. And who pays for that? Oh, that's Soros. But anyway, here I am back in Vietnam, experiencing my life, learning French. Je parle français avec Viet, tiếng Việt, tôi hiểu tiếng Việt. So learning Vietnamese and learning a bit of French. And here, experiencing what it's like to water ski in Vietnam on the Saigon River. That's that kind of like parallel universe between a full-on war going on and the idea that there's a little bit of French colonialism still surviving in Vietnam at this time in 1968, 69, all the way until 75. And then you start seeing a major shift towards communism. So as I got older, I still had my connections to Asia. We know that more famous one, which is the one where I was in prison in Vietnam for 11 months from 1983 until 1984. And front page articles around the world, coverage, BBC, CBS, ABC, Good Morning America, etc., etc., etc. That's when Joan London was pregnant during that interview. And also, I went to Shanghai 3 years ago. Before that, I was actually an instructor for the Korean Army. I went to go and teach over the Korean Army at their military intelligence school in Seoul. And the reason was because I wanted to learn Korean. I've always, I'm a polyglot. I like to learn various different kinds of languages. Back in Vietnam, Singapore, as I had said, we were required at the Singapore American School. When I attended Singapore American School, we had the options and the opportunities to not only learn the languages that are normally offered in the United States, such as French, Spanish, and English. French, Spanish, and German. But also, we had the opportunity to learn Malay, Salamat, and Malay, Melayu, and Cantonese, Mandarin, and Tamil, which are the main languages or subset languages under English in Singapore, the Republic of Singapore. And this was under Lee Kuan Yew, if you remember that time period. So anyway, as an adult, I went. 3 years ago, I'm a pilot, and a friend of mine who was actually working in China as a pilot suggested, hey, maybe we could get like an agency going and hire a bunch of pilots and bring them over to China and make the money as an agent for these pilots and getting them these really big gigs. And let me tell you, this is the interesting thing. So my buddy was making about, $32,000 a month as a pilot in China. Let me tell you, pilot jobs in China were fantastic. Well, the $32,000, $27,000 a month that my friends were making in China as pilots, as captains, is no longer available. It's now in the $4,000. And because of the COVID-19, the CCP virus, they're averaging about 6 hours a month of flying time. Because when you come back, if you fly like to Japan and come back, you have to go under a self-quarantine. So that's cutting into your time. So the golden days of flying in China, which were just basically, think about it, $32,000 a month, $27,000 a month. Phenomenal. And of course, you know what the agents were making. Yeah, there was an agency down in Arizona that was making a lot of money shipping these pilots out there. It's going to be interesting because there's a lot of Mexicana airline pilots who are still there. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 6 months globally and how that might affect these people. So here's what I want to talk about in terms of what we've been dealing with right here. What we've been dealing with right here is a major, major, major issue of the lack of the West understanding the East. And the reason is because depending on where you were born, where you were raised, you had probably been schooled in one type of understanding versus the other type of understanding. Now, the result of this understanding had led to two officers in the PLA, the people of the China's People's Liberation Army, which is the army that Mao Zedong had started. And this is Colonel Chao Liang and a Colonel, who is this right here? Yeah, that's a professor, but he's actually a colonel too. Yeah, senior colonel, retired senior colonel. So he's at a military school. A military college. So that's Wang Xiangshui. And they came out with this book called Unrestricted Warfare. Now, the understanding of unrestricted warfare is it follows along these... it's based on the idea that China, specifically the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, knew that if they got into a kinetic war with the United States, they would lose. And this was back then. Okay, about 1990. When did this one come out? It was actually released back in 1999. Released 1999 to the military in China, and then of course to members of the CCP. And over the years, I think it's been very well implemented. And see, they understood the weaknesses of the United States, and the weaknesses of the United States, as it's being talked about here, is that we think of war specifically as a military action, a kinetic action. And what the CCP looks at it as is actually alternative methods, a variety of methods of attack in order to deal with such a militarily powerful nation as the United States was, especially in 1999. And we are, but not to the level we were back in 99, relatively to the CCP. And the reason is because of a lot of agents and people who have basically, as far as I'm concerned, been traitors to the United States and the free world. And some of them are going to go to prison for a long, long, long time if they're treated properly. And I'll show you one of them, and hopefully a few of them. So let's talk about lawfare. And this is something that really gets me, because President Trump is playing this lawfare game back at the Chinese. And this is the thing about it, is that we will never, ever win the lawfare game. This is what annoys me, because it's actually what's happened in the United States. I mean, we've become such a litigious. They're using something that's so prevalent in the United States, which is the legal system and how it's manipulated by lawyers. And think about how many people become lawyers in this country, and how much of an institution it's become. And how, as instead of before, it was, oh, I'm going to go and defend people and do something good for people, it's become more and more a situation, an opportunity to bend the law. And we're seeing that in places like in Seattle. We're seeing that in places like Portland. So when before you had people who came to the office, and this is the office of service, and this is the thing that a lot of people don't remember or don't really understand, is the idea that the going into office was supposed to be a point of service, and it was actually something you did aside from what you were professionally employed as, such as you were a farmer, or you were a shipbuilder, or you were a printer, i.e. Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, a farmer, Thomas Jefferson. Yes, he was a lawyer, and very interesting some of the things that he's come up with over the years, and how that's been used actually by the radicals in this country as to qualify certain things that they've been doing. But the CCP has been using our legal system against us, and actually the willingness or the propensity for Americans to, instead of going into action, go into a war of a legal war, a war of words, basically, all talk and no action. It's become a game of rhetoric, and it's become an international game of rhetoric, and the Chinese rely on that. The CCP, the communist Chinese, rely on this because they know as long as they can keep us talking, we won't be blowing them up. And you're thinking to yourself, whoa, throwing bombs? Well, how many times have we thrown bombs in other countries just to get our way done over there? Why is it that we can go into Afghanistan and we can try and decide what we're going to do there, and then the irony of that is that the Chinese sweep in and benefit from all that work we've done in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Lebanon. Look what they're doing right now. Crazy. So they're working their way in there to benefit. They're already in Venezuela. They're already in Brazil. And they're in Brazil under the auspicion of being the customer of all that meat and all the food goods coming from Brazil. And South America going west. But also, I mean, Bolsonaro, at least that's been a change in removing the communist infrastructure that was there during Lula and Josefe. But let's say in my mother's country of Ecuador, you had Correa that came in, and then you got the situation now. Same freaking government, and they're all kowtowing, and they're all feeding oil from the Amazon out to China. Been going on for years. Then there's Then, of course, carries into the economic warfare that these two colonels have been talking about. And that's where they're really getting us. And they've been using it in two ways. They've been using it as having us as customers, where we use our own money, our own expenditure, our own wealth, and send it over to China towards their benefit. And it's been going in two ways. Not only do we send them money through the purchase of products and services from China, but we also do it through the actual outright donation through economic development aid that's been going on for decades. And this is the thing about it. So you've got economic warfare going on, and then you've got network. So right now, Australia is being attacked. Oh, and remember, was it a week ago when your cell phones went down? Yeah. No question in my mind about where that came from. That's just a test run. Think about what they could do if they could actually get in through your cell phone and wipe that out, or go through your cell phone, go through the network system and take out everything. And hey, you ever thought that all those cool systems that you've been sold on how to, like, automate your home with all that electronics, who's in control of that? You think you're in control of it? I like to have that tested when they do another assault, when they launch another campaign the way they did with the mobile phones, and what they're doing right now in Australia, because they are hammering Australia right now. And then, of course, we've got terrorism. And what kind of terrorism is that? This is when we start talking about bioweapons. And basically, what the United States and the rest of the world has experienced, and will continue to experience, probably for the rest of all our lives, is a bioweapon that keeps on floating around and causing chaos wherever it goes. And that's, people say, well, how can you talk about that? How can you, like, back up the idea that there's this big attack, that this is a bioweapon? Well, hopefully by the time I'm done with this episode, you'll see how the COVID-19 acts in a way that is quite unnatural. Because if it acted in this manner, it would have wiped out all the people. It would have wiped out the human species years ago. But suddenly it's appeared now, and it's appeared and developed. And I talked about it in the last episode about how it developed in 10 years. I mean, it gained attributes that in the natural world would take 1,000 years minimum. A minimum 1,000 years. And I've got some major questions. All these great scientists and virologists who just go on and on about how great their PhDs are and everything, but then they'll come around and say, no. COVID-19 never could have been designed in a lab. Yeah. And I'm going to go further into how the Five Eyes report. So I've actually looked at that Five Eyes report. Nobody's ever been really, like, showing that Five Eyes report. Well, that Five Eyes report, the one that the Australians reported on and basically said, hey, they've been working on a bioweapon program for years. And actually, if you go back into, I think it was 2005, there's a State Department report. Just type in, Google it. It's bioweapon, China, and 2005 State Department report. And basically, it's just a report about how countries act and deal with each other. And the reason it's so important is that part of the deal of when we started giving money and economic aid to China, to Red China, is that they were supposed to stop their bioweapons program, kind of like we were supposed to stop our bioweapons program, right? Okay. So evidently they didn't, and by 2005 they're still going at it. And based on the information that's been available, they're still going at it, and they'll continue to keep on going at it. So my question to everybody is, like, what is happening here? What is going to happen in terms of where are we going to go with this? Is the U.S. going to actually deal responsibly with China in a way that goes further than just rhetoric? Because this little legal rhetoric game has not been very successful for us. It's been profoundly successful for the Chinese, for the Red Chinese. I mean, they've gone after Taiwan. What's happening in Hong Kong? Who's got the guns? It's not the Hong Kongese. Imagine what would happen if the Hong Kongese had guns. I don't think they would be so successful in coming down so hard on the... And it's not even a revolution. It's basically the Hong Kongese just want the Chinese, they want Beijing. They want Beijing to respect the accord that was set up when they took possession of Hong Kong from the Brits. So, yeah, here to talk about defense against... Well, I'm going to be talking about further on that. So, here's the thing about East-West. And, like, in our country, and this is the reason I call Washington, D.C. the snake pit. And I've told you about my background and experience that goes all the way back to 1984. And every time I go back to D.C., I just can't wait to get out of D.C. because I'm reminded about how just about everybody who's in politics is well read in The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. And what is so important about that? Because basically it's a book about how to stab everybody in the back. It's all about the politics. It's all about how when he was all about the Medicis and all the different courts and all that time back in what was that time Italy. And how they had basically created a political system that sadly we've gone quickly more towards that. And that's why you see people like Pelosi and all these different politicians and Schiff and left and right, and it's kind of like, you can't even become a politician unless you've got major investors. And this is the big question. This is the problem I have, is that you can't get in without a certain amount of millions in terms of wealth to get in. So it's like, who's really being represented? And most people who don't have the money, they go to someone to back them up. Well, they don't back them up out of the goodness of their heart. They back them up because they realize that, hey, when I get this politician in here and it comes down to a vote on some type of decision, whether it's where I can mine, whether it's where I can, how many people I can employ in a certain time or whatever age, et cetera, or where can I have my product line manufactured, whether it's going to have to be manufactured in the United States as an American product for Americans, or it's going to go out to China, or it's going to go off to India, or it's going to go off to some other country, and especially, this is the key point about it, it's just like, at least India right now is an ally of us, and if you've been hearing about the fighting that's up on the border with China between India, they're basically doing the kinetic. That's a proxy war. That's proxy. Think about that. Don't think about just the idea, oh, it's India against China. No, that's India fighting in the name of the United States and the free world. Because one of the reasons that's occurred is because of the anger that the Indian leadership has with how the Chinese, how Xi Jinping is trying to mold all this rhetoric around. Again, remember, they're the ones who are playing the game. They're the ones who are controlling all this. Trying to control all the rhetoric about how China will be depicted. Remember this. Remember this as the golden phrase, which is, he or she who writes history controls history. And if China writes the history and it's recorded as that history and everything's destroyed, it'll be destroyed because they were allowed to write that history. You're allowing them to write that history. And if they write that history, it will actually show that their tactic of unrestricted warfare was successful. But here, we have the Prince, we have meditations, we have the Keynesian view of economics, which we're finding isn't working out too well. But over in China, and that book on the left that I referred to, that when I was studying Mandarin back at Singapore American School, we were asked to see if we could read that book, Thick Black Theory. And that was written by, Lee? Oh, right here. And you can actually get a copy. I mean, that book is available up at Amazon, and it's a let's see, yeah, Lee Zhongwu. So Lee Zhongwu is the author, but here's another book that came out that was actually an interpretation, which I found to be really useful too, which is Thick Face, Black Heart. So the thick and the black theory, it's actually the thick face, black heart, and it's the idea of how the Chinese, this is taught. I mean, this has been taught since the 1920s when it first came out, and it's very controversial because nobody wants to be known as they had in China to have read this book, because it is so dark. It's the idea that you don't do anything unless you come from the most darkest part of your heart. And most importantly is that you never show the face. You never, ever show the face. And that's the thing about the CCP. Everything that comes out of their mouth is a flat-out lie. It's a flat-out lie. Every single time. And the reason is because they're conditioned to respond in this way. Just like in most politicians in D.C. now are conditioned to respond in the manner as taught by Machiavelli. Thick Black Theory is how everybody who's gotten into the CCP, they've read that book. I guarantee everybody who's in the CCP has read that book, and they have taken the philosophies and theories to heart. And these are ones going back in the idea that if you come in with any part of the light heart, if you don't come from just a full black dark heart, then you will be annihilated by anybody else who will be using or coming from a dark black heart and using the tactic of a thick face. Thick face meaning that you'll never be able to read them, kind of like, a poker face, but I mean even much, much, much stronger than a poker face. This is what is happening. This is why you have these smiles from the CCP leadership while their own people are being massacred by the disease. And I'll show you that. I mean, it's like the lies that keep on coming out, like, oh yeah, we got it under control. And then they pull off this little stunt again. Remember before it was the market in Wuhan, and now it's the market in Beijing. I mean, this is a very large market. It's gigantic, and they're coming from the point of view that, hey, this is that it's not China's fault. It's not the CCP's fault. And remember, they're doing all this because they have to stay in power. They will sacrifice everybody. They will sacrifice everybody in China and the rest of the world just so they can be still on top of the hill. Okay? They have to be in power. That's what they're all about. They're not about like helping the people or protecting the people. The U.S. Constitution was written and designed to protect the U.S. citizen and the United States. Okay, in contrast, it's designed by the founding fathers who wrote that beautiful, amazing document based on all the lessons they learned. They were very well learned in all the previous governments, the democracies, the republics, going through the Greeks, the Romans. And based on that, they created the U.S. Constitution. And that's why all those amendments, everything that's in the quote, are called the Bill of Rights. Those are in there to protect you. It's not the idea that you're guaranteed money. You're not guaranteed cash, as the socialists are trying to play it now. You're supposed to be guaranteed the right, the opportunity to go and make wealth, and also to be protected. That's the thing about it. The United States government is solely tasked, according to the Constitution, with making sure that you're safe, that you are physically safe, and that you're allowed to practice your religion. Your personal, that's under the First Amendment. You're able to communicate. That's it. Okay? Nothing. There's other stuff in there, but that's the main point. Okay? In China, in the CCP, they have a constitution, kind of like the Soviet Union had a constitution. And again, both of them are missing the Second Amendment, by the way, because force is the only way you back up rhetoric. And that's a thing that the Chinese, the CCP, is banking on, is that if they can keep us in this war of words, they'll always continue to win. Because while they're having this war of words with us, they're coming in and supporting Hezbollah and working on getting control of the Lebanese Swiss bank. Okay, so by controlling that, they now have even stronger ties in the Middle East. They've already got Afghanistan in terms of the mining. So they've got Zimbabwe. They're pulling out all the resources out of Zimbabwe. Then we've also got the actions that they're working in the Spratly. See, now the Spratly, that's something that's kind of like outside of their comfort zone, because that's violence. That's going to be actual physical violence. So if you really want to get deep into this, I mean, anybody who's been in combat, if you haven't read The Art of War, or anybody who's been in guerrilla warfare, if you've never studied The Art of War, I'd be kind of amazed. But these three books, you've got the Thick Black Theory, You've got Thick Face Black Heart, and this basically she's taken the books and compile them and kind of like translate or interpret them into as Western as she could. She passed away, the author Chin-Ning Chu, Ms. Chu. And then you've got Sun Tzu, the Art of War. Read those books, and you'll totally understand what's happening in the world right now, because that's the strategy. That's what they're doing. That's how they play. And the playing of this game goes way back. See, it goes even further back than what most people think, which is Tiananmen Square and Bush Sr., President Bush, George Bush. And when that began, the negotiations for aiding the Chinese, because the Chinese were saying, we don't have money, we don't have enough to change, and that's the reason we just have these bad issues right here in this country. We're not really able to help our people. But if you send us money, send money now, we'll be able to help you. And in reality, of course, is when you send money, free money, they just help themselves. And that's the biggest lesson. The biggest lesson of the CCP is use the weight. If you studied martial arts, you well know Hwarangdo, Kung Fu, Karate. Every one of them are based on the idea of using the weight of your enemy against your enemy. So they are using the strength and the wealth of the United States against, and actually the free world, if you really look at it, against us. They're using our own weight against us, using our own wealth against us. And they've been doing it for decades. And I mean decades. Yeah. And who do they do it with? Yeah. They do it through the Zogo. The Zogo, otherwise known as the running dog. Or as I like to say to Ms. Pelosi, yeah, Nisha Zogo, you are a running dog. And it's ironic because the running dogs we have in the States are being played and being used. Schiff, Newsom, Pelosi, and a variety of other people who work in Congress. They're supposed to be protecting us, but they think, oh, we're just doing business in China. No, you're not doing business in China. You're being played. And some of you are very well up that you're being played, and others are just idiots. But we have so many running dogs right now, and they're in very many fields, i.e. the education system, institutions, medical institutions, NIH, all being used. And because these are all institutions that either provide intellectual property or they provide the actual currency directly to the CCP. And the CCP then uses that to create its own weapons. That economic development, yeah, so they're building factories in China so that during Clinton, when it really started ramping up, all these businesses were going overseas to China. And then we're going to pay for that. So as American citizens, we're not only paying as a taxpayer into China, but then we're also paying into China as a customer. I mean, that's like the self-licking ice cream cone, it seems like. And when did it really get going? And that was back in 1972. See, because Henry Kissinger, he comes off as so smart, but maybe he should have read Thick Black Theory long before and really understood that, because, see everybody who's laughing right there? Yeah, Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, long dead. Yeah, best henchman of Mao. And so about this time, Mao's still alive, but you know who Deng Xiaoping is reporting back to? This is about the time was like, we don't have enough money. And this is the thing about the Chinese and the CCP. They're always saying, oh, I don't have enough. See, this is the thing I totally understand. See, because being raised in Asia, you go to a market. I mean, that's why, like, my friends are always asking me, God, when we travel, it's just like, shoot, can you go negotiate? Go negotiate. Well, why don't you go and freaking make a deal? Because I learned in Asia. I learned how to make a deal in Asia. And when you're a little kid and you go down to the store or you go down to the market, you realize that there is no set value on anything. And you can get that price down. As a matter of fact, I can even still go into like San Francisco. It's the United States. But I'll go to San Francisco, Chinatown, and I will be amazed if I don't get at least half off or 3/4 off what the value is that I'm being hit with when I walk through the door. And that's how things are run in China and Asia, which is you never, ever, ever pay the label. Never pay the price that is asked, because you don't ever want to pay the price for a variety of reasons. First of all, it makes you look like an idiot. Secondly, they have no respect for you after you've done that. Thirdly, they're laughing at you, and they're actually enjoying the idea they just ripped you off. And that's what the Chinese have been doing to us since at least 1972. And they almost got in back in 49. But something called the Korean War happened. And that's the thing about it. And this is the thing about understanding what the Chinese are willing to do. Because it's still there. And this goes all the way back to the ancient history of China. Where do you think China comes from? The word China. China comes from the Emperor Qin. The Emperor Qin, go read about it. Go Google Qin, C-H-I-N. The Emperor Qin was the one who actually created the first empire, the first country of China. Okay? And he was known for how he had no problem, and I mean no problem, just sending thousands and thousands of his own warriors to die on the battlefield against the enemy. There was no cost too expensive in terms of his own people to gain the land and unify that country and create that country that would become the beginning of China. Then let's jump to the future. And 49, 50, 51. And then what happens? North Korea and the invasion of South Korea. And how MacArthur goes in and he gets up to the Yellow River. And people say, well, he misunderstood. You know, he should have really understood what was going to happen if he did get up to the Yellow River. But there was a thing going on, and that was the old tie. And this is what's really important for Trump to really get an idea, is that he's really got to make another division between Russia and China, because you can't have those two people realigned the way they were before. And actually, it's actually very easy to do, because Russians and Chinese do not like each other. And this goes back thousands of years. Remember what I talked about tribalism? The human animal, the human society, everything about us is that we're tribal. And the Chinese tribe does not like the Russian tribe, the Slavic tribe. And when you key in on that, as Nixon did, he was able to get the separation, but this time on the opposite side, which is to get China out of the war in Vietnam and stop aiding the Soviet Union. But see, back in Korea, there wasn't that option. And that's why Stalin asked Mao and said, hey, we're having problems and we've lost basically all of North Korea, so we no longer have a foothold in Korea anymore, which was how it was designed at the end of World War II, which is to have North Korea under Soviet/communist rule and to have South Korea under free world, and be able to not have a full country, a complete country of domination in the same way that was happening in Vietnam, with the French, where you actually had colonialism, French colonialism, and the Viet Minh. And that's actually another topic we'll be talking about in the future. But anyway, so the Yellow River, so the Chinese came in at the request of Stalin. And that's how this keeps on running, is the idea that if you have these unified communists and you get communism unto itself, it's not the idea. See, this is the thing. This is the whole idea. It's communism. And we have issues in this country, in the United States, with communism. Communism has gotten a foothold. Think about that. Don't think about it, the idea, oh, well, like Durkin would like to tell you, because as far as I'm concerned, Durkin is just a student of Saul Alinsky. The mayor of Seattle is just another lawyer who's learned how to play the game and how to manipulate the system. That's what's happened. Our political system is rife with all these lawyers who have learned how to play the legal system and manipulate the legal system, not to do what's right, but in order to push forth their control. Okay, so here we've got Durkin, who is a radical at heart, assisting these people, ignoring the people living in these neighborhoods, and allowing a foreign force. These, quote, demonstrators, they were demonstrators when they were carrying signs and walking down the street and yelling and screaming. Okay, you have that right. You don't have the right to pick up weapons, and you also don't have rights to drive up a vehicle full of other weapons and start handing them out. This is the amazing thing. There's now an armed enemy force that has gained territory in the United States, in Seattle, and I heard it, and Portland also. They tried to do it in San Francisco, but thank God the mayor of San Francisco and the law enforcement in San Francisco took care of it. So that's a good thing. So what have we been giving? So over the years, aid to the CCP from the U.S. Yes. In 78, China and Japan normalized, etc. Billions. In 2001, it received $1.4 billion in foreign aid. And then we've also got, 1999, $2.4 billion. U.S. taxpayer money being used and absorbed by an enemy state. Remember, in 1949, in 1949, Mao Zedong was full on his way to setting up China as a direct enemy of the United States and the free world. And this is the key about it. So what I'm talking about here is we're going to be talking about what's called center of gravity, or COG. So the center of gravity, we'll talk about it further, is based on the teachings of General von Clausewitz. And this is taught at all the military colleges, and it comes from his writings on war. Now, the center of gravity can be a variety of things. It can be a city, it can be a leadership, it can be a leader, it can be anything, and I'll be talking further about that, but I just want to get that in your frame of mind. And how Mao Zedong was not back in the before he died, he was kind of like he was the center of gravity, but after that it changed. And the center of gravity became the CCP. And this is really important to understand, because that's what's different. And we'll talk about that further in a moment. But they've been using our wealth against us. Every time they've got an opportunity that we give them money, they take it. And that's under the unrestricted warfare. And that's actually just a definition. If you really look at it, if it came out in 1999, it was written in 1999, it's actually a collation of the understanding that's been going on ever since they've been making the money off of us to go against us, since on full bore since Tiananmen Square. The idea, we're not changing our country because we don't have enough money. So we keep on giving them money, but what do? Instead of that, all we do is give them more wealth to strengthen the CCP. And this is the thing about it, they were always lying about the idea that they didn't have any resources, they didn't have any wealth. They had a lot of wealth. They've always had wealth and resources, but they always were good at keeping it quiet. And then we gave them ours, and now when they were actually not as strong as us, they become very strong. And that's the thing about it. So they're using our own money. So the money and the economic development that we've sent to them, they've used it and turned it around in order to buy all and pay off all these debts for all these other countries like Zimbabwe and all these other countries that they've bought out. And by buying out their, first they offer it. See, and that's the thing. They're always very polite about it. They offer it. And then these countries have become so racked by their own leadership, which 9 times out of 10, well, I think it's 100%, is socialist. So they let these socialists totally trash their countries, and then they take the debt. And looking at this strategy, they're working on doing it to the United States. Think about that. Think about it. As an American citizen, how do you feel about the Chinese Communist Party using your own taxpayer money to come around and take over your own country? People used to think it was bad. Oh my God, the Japanese are buying up all these companies and businesses in the U.S. Oh my God. Well, when they did it, it was kind of like a death roll. It was a death hold, because if we went down, they went down. But the thing with the Chinese is that they've got quite a bit of the world they've been taking over, and they've been doing it through using our own finances, financing their economic campaign. And here's the key about the CCP is understanding the CCP is just another imperial dynasty. And I'm going to talk about the imperial dynasty aspect of it in a few minutes. And the reason is because to understand that if you understand the Chinese dynasty and as an imperial dynasty, it's the CCP dynasty instead of like the Qin dynasty that started all this. But understanding that it's the same philosophy, which is that according to the philosophy of the dynasties, it's always the objective of China to be the center of the evolution, the revolutions of the sun. So China should always be at the center of where the sun is always revolving around. Think about that. That's never changed. So before that used to be the philosophy of the empire, the emperors and empresses of China. Then it has become of this new dynasty, which is the CCP dynasty, that the sun will never set. Kind of like, they used to say the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, now the Chinese are working on making sure that the sun never sets on the CCP's dynasty or on their empire. And how do they do it? Here's another Zolgo, a nice running dog, and that's Tedros. So why is anybody listening to this guy? This is today. Coronavirus pandemic accelerating with America's worst, warns WHO head Tedros. Now Tedros, he's not even a doctor. And it's amazing how many people are in these leadership roles in all these institutions that have been sending money to the CCP and enemies of the United States and the free world. And most of them are either not medical doctors or haven't practiced medicine in decades. So here you got Tedros today talking about, you should listen to me. So what's the benefit? So if Tedros says something like, I got to ask a question. Ask yourself a question. If he says the coronavirus pandemic is accelerating with America's the worst, well, we know based on all the lies that China is the worst, but we'll never get that from them because they'll never let the real numbers come out. And when you look at some of the numbers they've shot out compared to other countries that have been very open about it, and there's no way that the numbers that come out of China are anywhere near accurate. And yet, Tedros is saying that we've got the highest numbers in the United States. That's total bull hockey. But most importantly, this guy, his background is he's an Ethiopian Maoist. This guy is an Ethiopian Maoist who was running the WHO, the WHO. And remember what I said about, use the weight of the enemy. So what is the weight of the enemy for the CCP? Well, it's all the money that we're putting in. Thank God Trump stopped that. And I hope to God he stops it for the UN, and they kick the UN off that freaking territory in the United States, in New York, and they send it and reset that building and put something else that actually be an institution, organization, or business will be pro-American instead of the UN, where we're spending all this money in the UN. We were spending all this money in the WHO. And this is how the Chinese are so adept at running the game of using the weight of the enemy against the enemy. Okay? So they have used the WHO from day one against the United States by buying the leadership in the WHO. See, think about it. It's cheaper. The WHO was funded by the United States. So they used all our great wealth that we were putting in the WHO with the whole idea that, we're just going to be making sure that all this medical research is going to come back and help us. Instead, what happens is Tedros is telling everybody, don't worry about it. There's nothing a problem. I've talked with Xi Jinping, and he's telling us there's not a problem at all in China. At the same time he's doing that in December, China is allowing all these people who've been infected, 400,000 nationals coming from China into the United States. infecting the United States and all the other countries that they were going off to. Remember the textile business in Italy? Why do you think there was such a big spike in northern Italy? The reason was because they have a large Chinese worker base in that part of Italy that does all, you like the handbags, Gucci, etc. Yeah, Prada. Those are all sewn, cut by Chinese workers, and those workers were coming in from China, coming in from Wuhan, and they were infecting Italy, and that's the reason they had such a big outbreak so quickly, so fast. But the guy who was aiding and abetting, I mean, this is a guy that should, when this is all over, they should be going and getting this guy the same way they got Osama bin Laden. They should be going after Tedros and getting that guy. And you want an international court? There'll be more than enough information to put that guy in front of a firing squad. Or actually, I think they should go even the older way, which is just hang him. Do it just the way they did with the Nazis. Just hang him. So here's one running dog. Here's one Zogo. Okay? Here's one Zogo that was working under Xi Jinping, bought out by Xi Jinping. And the reason I'm using this, there's another one actually, that it's very interesting that the last article that I read, Tedros was going to go speak at a university in China. And guess whose university that was? The alma mater of Xi Jinping. So think about that. Kind of like, remember when Clinton had all these speaking engagements? Bill? Hillary? Yeah, Hillary. Yeah, all these speaking engagements because they had all these deals with all these people, all these connections. This is how sick and twisted it is. And you and I, as citizens of the world, of the free world, yeah, they're coming to get us. And I'm hoping that Trump is freaking going to kick their butts and put them where they should be, which is in prison. Oh, speaking of another Zogo, yeah, Pelosi, recalling her visit to Tiananmen Square. Yeah, we were chased by police. Chased by police. Okay. Yeah. This is during the time that we're sending all this money over. Let me tell you, from my own experiences, back in Vietnam, remember, communists are communists. I don't care where you're from. If you're a communist, you're the enemy of the free state. You're the enemy of the United States. If you're a commie, you're freaking an enemy of the U.S. Constitution. You're an enemy of the free world. If you're a Vietnamese communist, I don't care. You're a communist. If you're a Chinese communist, I don't care. You're a communist. If you're a Brazilian communist, I don't care. You're a communist. If you're the FMLN, by the way, yeah, see, I asked those questions of myself. Why did I participate fighting communists for 5 years in Central America against the FMLN, and then the Salvadoran people vote them in? So they vote in the very people who are going out and recruiting, or I should say enslaving, or they used to call them volunteers from the villages, the campesinos, and bringing them in and also committing atrocities that the press would never want to cover. Do you ever wonder why I accepted recruitment when I first started off as a journalist? Yeah, because witness an atrocity, wouldn't take it when I got to the Camino Real Hotel because it didn't fit the agenda. And what was the agenda in Central America? The agenda during Central America was, as I was told, hey, you know, if you witness an atrocity and it was committed by the government, we want to hear about that. But we don't want to hear about atrocities being committed by the guerrillas, i.e., it doesn't fit the agenda. This has been going on for years. Years. You talk about fake news from the media? It's been going on for years. Think about it. Think about it when President Reagan was going to show video on camera, and he was going to address the American people about how the Sandinistas were smuggling weapons to the FMLN. And I'll show you a picture of how I was assisting in stopping that. We're smuggling weapons to the FMLN using gunboats coming across the Gulf of Fonseca, otherwise known as the Gulf of Fonseca, that is bordered by El Salvador, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And the only one who actually released that broadcast or covered it was CNN. That's pretty wild. So Turner back then was actually trying to do the right thing, which is cover the news. While ABC, CBS, and NBC, they didn't do it. Yeah. Got to ask yourself about that. Oh, they said, I think, was it a football game? Yeah, I think that was more important than understanding the fact that Fidel Castro was being very successful in Central America. And if he got successful in Central America, the communist government at that time of Mexico would have had no problems of rolling tanks into the United States. And guess what? Oh, that part about that movie called, what was it, Red Dawn? Back in the 80s, it wasn't too far off for those of who were actually fighting in the war and realizing what was happening. As compared to guys who were back, saying, hey, man, I'm going to college. Okay. So, let's carry on with another Zogo. So, Zogo and Nancy Pelosi, tell me about how you were chased by police in Tiananmen Square. And as you're chased by people in Tiananmen Square, let me try and understand why you would then be party to a Chinatown that has just changed its face in San Francisco. Such as, okay, here she's saying, okay, Pelosi says she encouraged public gatherings in Chinatown to end the discrimination against Asian Americans. This, mind you, is while the COVID-19, the CCP virus, is going rampant. I mean, it's just building up some real momentum in the United States. And she's telling everyone, why don't you just come into Chinatown? In Chinatown, this is where everybody's, come in. Of the 400,000 that Xi Jinping was saying, get them out of here. Realizing, remember, this is all about evening the playing field. China had a bioweapon they were working on. It got away from them. And then they realized, shoot, we've already been impacted by what Trump was already doing to our economy. If we have to deal with this and the idea we're going to lose our workforce, how are we going to deal with this while everybody's all healthy? So let's make sure that this disease, the COVID-19, gets out to the rest of the world. And then hopefully we'll have like an evened out playing field with the rest of the world, right? Okay. So here she is telling, hey, you should go out. It's again, they're playing the race card. Isn't it funny how the socialists, the left, Pelosi, are using the race card to play their game instead of going down to brass tacks, which is the reason people don't want to go to Chinatown is there's a great and actual based fear of the idea that those who have come in from China, and there are people from China, from the CCP, because this is the different China. I personally wouldn't have had any problem with somebody coming in from Taiwan. Why? Because the Taiwanese, they knew what was happening in China, and Tedros and the leadership of the WHO would not listen to them because they don't recognize Taiwan. They only recognize the CCP. And why do they only recognize CCP? Because Tedros is a Maoist. He's an Ethiopian Maoist. He's known for actually having committed genocide in his own country with what had happened in terms of an epidemic that had occurred there. And then you've got this, the WHO wouldn't recognize any of the information that was being collected, intelligence, by Taiwan. It wouldn't be until later when the Five Eyes is a group of, including Australia, Singapore, the US, New Zealand, UK, who have intelligence services paying attention to what's really happening. And I've got some screenshots for you that I think you'll find very interesting. So just in a moment, we'll go there. But this is the thing about it. It's like Chinatown. So there's the Chinatown I remember, and there's the Chinatown that it's become. And it's kind of like, I think, just deplorable that the idea that those who now think, oh, well, China's so open. And it's like, then why is it that their grandparents and maybe even their parents escaped China? And the flag that's being flown, this flag right here, this is the flag that's flown in Chinatown now. The parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who escaped Mao Zedong and came to Taiwan or Hong Kong or Singapore or Thailand and then came to the United States to then have residency and then become Americans are rolling over. If they're dead, they're rolling over in their graves right now to see this is what's happened. Their descendants are flying this flag. This flag is the flag of the CCP. This is the flag that murders its own people repeatedly. In contrast to, this is the kind of flag that would normally have been flown before. This is the successful propaganda efforts of the CCP. And that's why that flag is a Taiwanese flag that would have been flying over San Francisco's Chinatown and not the red Chinese flag, because everybody who was living in China pretty much had gone to Chinatown in order to escape that. And everything was being represented by that flag. Yeah, wild. I.e., state-sanctioned murder. Yeah, think about that. Forbes reporting on the China killing prisoners to harvest organs for transplant. And BMC report accuses China of falsifying data. So if you get thrown in prison in China, you disappear. You're not coming back because you're more useful to them as making money by selling organs. Those organs will go to anybody who's got the same type of blood type, et cetera, et cetera. And think about who's actually the customers of that. That's actually, I think, in the free world. Because as far as I'm concerned, what's happening in China right now with this, no difference from this. But yet, people don't see the comparison. They say, well, that's China. I mean, we do business with China. Why would we be doing business with the Nazis, right? Who are executing people, right? Murdering them, using them as slaves, and then murdering them. And that's because of something called denialism. Denialism in the psychology of human behavior. Denialism is a person's choice to deny reality as a way to avoid a psychologically uncomfortable truth. Denialism is an essentially irrational action that withholds the validation of a historical experience or event when a person refuses to accept an empirically verifiable reality. And that's what's happening right now. And that's happening on a variety of levels. Think about that. It's happening in terms of people can't, first of all, think of the idea that China, a country that we've been sending our own tax dollars to, would actually be trying to destroy us and the rest of the world and put us under their rule. Or that they would be killing their own people just so that they can stay in power. I mean, that's just bloodthirsty, right? Oh, my God. But we're doing business with them. I mean, Nike makes their shoes over there, has their shoes made over there. Bill Gates has his Microsoft product made over there, or has been. We'll see what happens soon. Apple. Oh, yeah, the iPhone. Where was that made? Yeah, over there. Is there a conflict of interest here? I think so. What about you? But then again, we go back to that old saying that I talked about in the last episode, 3 men make a tiger. 3 men make a tiger. And that's the idea that if you keep on saying a lie over and over, it finally becomes a tiger. It becomes real. And that brings us back to something, again, the Zogos. So the running dogs are always bought off. Or they're intimidated, but in this situation in the U.S., they're bought off. And that's the Thousand Talents program. It's been made illegal in this country, but the thing about it is, do you think it's stopped? Of course it hasn't stopped. What is the Thousand Talents program? The Thousand Talents program is how China, the CCP, Communist Red China, has been able to basically steal all our intellectual property. And they do it in 2 ways. One is they hire somebody to do it for them, or they flat out just pay somebody to give it to them. And that brings us to somebody, who actually got charged. Charles Lieber. You may have been paying attention about this guy, Harvard professor. He was actually charged with working on the designs of the Wuhan lab where the coronavirus came from. And let's look further into his background. Remember this wonderful thing? Oh, yeah, it tells us lots of things about who's here. So why don't we type in Lieber and Charles. What does that bring up? Remember, we got to hit the fiscal year on here. Oh, just like with Peter Daszak. Yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Wow. Boom, boom, boom. So let's stick with, let's stick with Harvard. Did I tell you my father went to Harvard? Harvard, yeah. He got his MBA from Harvard. Just just before, was it 62, 61 is when he got his MBA? Yeah. And even then, as he was telling me, yeah, that school is well on its way to flying a red flag. But look at all these things. Harvard University. Okay, 2009, 2000. But see, these are the ones that get real important. So, Charles M. Lieber. So he's getting all this money. So he's double dipping. So he's going off and he's working on all these projects. He's getting these grants for through Harvard University. But then, as you read the article about his charges, he's also getting paid by the Chinese. So and he didn't inform the university that he was getting paid by the Chinese, because this is important, because this is when it became more and more important, the idea that the 1,000 Talents program was designed to steal our intellectual property. So remember, the unrestricted warfare, this is one of their strategies, is to come in and steal our technology, steal our goods, and produce them. Here's a situation where, what is China's trying to do with this? They're working towards becoming the end-all, the people to go talk to about medicine. So if they're the ones who are becoming the ones who are having control of everything, they circumvent the United States by making it look, hey, you know, this is, so let's take a look at something like that. Neural addiction, syringe, nervous system, central nervous system, 2000, goes back, this is earlier. That's when he was over at CIT. And reading on this, so here's technology he would have been working on, and he would have been providing to the Chinese because he was being paid for it. Oh, very interesting stuff. Understanding the complex circuitry with mammalian brains remains a major challenge. And here's the results. Remember what I talked about with the Nazis and why it was so easy to convict them. They're really good at documenting everything. So all these things here, where's the publication? The journal, Chemical Review, nano letters, he's very well. And this is the key, going back over there. Look at the names here. Xiaoyang, Tao Zhou, Theodore Zhuang, okay. Mr. Hong, Guosong Hong, and Yunlong Zhao, okay? So all these names right here, okay? And we've learned with the lab in, was it Ontario? Yeah. With a professor who mysteriously died when he went to go and do a talk in Kenya. Oh, yeah. Oh, man, it's this rabbit thing. This rabbit hole that just keep on going deeper and deeper. So that's just Charles Lieber. Who else? Who else have they had under the 1,000 Talents program that they've been using as a weapon towards us? And here's that 5 eyes. Okay, isn't that kind of wild? So remember they were saying, and this is the way the press was reporting on it, that it's coming. It didn't appear until December 2019. COVID-19 didn't appear in China until December 2019. Right? Well, according to the intelligence services, our friendlies, it actually started a little bit earlier. Okay, so you see what's happening here in Wuhan. This is a night shot. Well, this is actually a graphic of the. This is an illustration of service, cell phone service. So everybody's got their cell phones. You see, they're going up and down. They're talking on their cell phones while they're driving up and down the highway. Okay, moving back and forth. High areas of activity. So that's from July 2019 until March 2020, right? And then you've got this one right here. This is the little spot within that time period, right? Okay. No, actually, so July to March 2020. And then here, you've got this October 14th to, it's October 14th to the 19th. Okay. So That was last year, 2019. That is here. This is what they're talking about. Okay, this is the full dive down. August 2019, September 19. Seems okay. Everybody's using their cell phones at the lab, right? This is the Wuhan lab right here. That's what was here. Right here. Right here. So here. Activity. Here. People are saying that's a security guard. How'd you like to be the security guard from October 2019 to November 2019 working there? I wouldn't want to be that guy. Could be that guy that I saw in one of those videos, and you may have seen that video too, where the guy's just like looking at his monitor and suddenly he just keels over like he'd been shot in the head. Yeah, that was a freaky time for those of us who were paying attention, going, what the hell is this going on in China? Oh, and there's the bat lady. Oh, and those are the pictures nobody wanted you to see back then. Like people just like falling down on the street, right? Or like the videos are coming out of my mother's country in Ecuador, in Guayaquil. Same thing. Same symptoms. But yet it's not really happening. Okay. And then here's General Wei. So General Wei, she's Chen Wei. PLA. And this is the thing about being a bioweapon. Nothing happens in the science, in medical, that doesn't have a parallel, intertwined aspect in the military. There's always a tie between it because it develops. It's always making sure that the military always has the latest technology. They work on something related to communications, the military has a copy of it. They work on something related to aviation, the military has a copy of it. They work on something that could be a potentially dangerous virus, the military has a copy of it. And they're always working together. And finally, when, quote, the civilians can't handle it, they call on somebody like this Brigadier General, General Wei, okay? Chen Wei. And this is the thing about it. Okay, so think about the symptoms. This is how you understand it's a bioweapon as compared to it's just, oh, well, it developed. And I'm going to show you how it didn't just develop. It had an insert. It had a genome cleaved into it. And you only do that in a lab. But dextromethorphan, what's that? That's what you find in cough syrups. So think about it. Coincidence that the very thing that you would use as a remedy for the dry cough is actually the very ingredient that will also cause COVID-19, the CCP virus, to grow. So you keep on sucking down that cough syrup and you're basically feeding more food to the virus that's going to get bigger and kill you. I mean, did that happen naturally, coincidentally? I ask you. Along with the 14-day asymptomatic quality of it, so that it can run around and infect as many people as possible. Was it fully developed? Well, that's a great question. I can't really make an assumption or opinion about that. And that's why I do think that it wasn't fully developed as a weapon. I think it did truly escape. But see, this is the thing about it, is that when it escaped, if China was not an enemy of the free world, China would have immediately notified and said, my God, we've been working on this. We are trying to come up with a cure for the original SARS coronavirus. Or, as other people had said, we are trying to come out with a cure for the AIDS. But instead, they keep quiet about it. They get their little henchman, their little running dog, Tedros, to lie to the rest of the world that, oh no, everything's okay. And so the CDC in the US is saying, well, the WHO's telling us, the WHO is telling us, oh, it's all okay, it's fine, it's nothing for us to worry about it. And we're all walking around thinking, hey, say hi, breathe on somebody's food. Okay. So it's the idea that there's too many coincidences about like a cough syrup that actually will cause you to have it grow in your body, that it has a 14-day asymptomatic ability, And then when you get it, it actually turns your the thrombosis that occurs in your lungs, that basically is turning your lungs into concrete. So when you get the COVID-19 and it goes into your lungs, it basically is everything that gets all scar tissue, you get all the scar tissue in your lungs, you'll never have that lung again. And that's why all these people who have had it, all ages, are complaining and describing the ailments of like, I can never get back to my life. And that's the reason I don't ever want to get this. Knock on wood, I do not get this. And I'm pretty sure you don't want to get this. People will be telling you, again, it's like left, right kind of thing. Oh, well, you know, if you wear a mask, it's because, well, you're just a leftist. And if you're really right wing, then you wouldn't wear a mask. I'm telling you, if you're 6 feet close to me and I don't know who you are, and I haven't been normally around you, you're not family, you're not close friend. It's like, I'm not going to be standing too close to you because I don't want to get it. Because if you got it and you're breathing it, it may not be affecting you, but it could affect me. And I think it's more than just age. I think it's actually genetics, because one of the researches they did was that people with blood type O actually weren't being as hard hit by it, which I find very interesting. Well, thank God I'm O positive, by the way. But anyway, this is the other thing too. Michael Osterheim, did you see that interview? It's over here on YouTube. Yeah, Joe Rogan interviews Michael Osterholm. And this is the thing, I get really ticked off when somebody talks about their PhD and how experienced they are in the lab, you know, and it's like, and they know everything. They know everything. So he's saying, oh no, there's no way it could have been designed. No way it could have been designed in a lab. Yeah. And Joe Rogan's like, oh, okay, yeah. Really? Oh, okay, well, okay. So there's no way. It's just naturally occurring. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because Osterholm has a PhD next to his name, and that used to mean something, right? But evidently, when people are trying to hide the fact that they were getting money, as we noticed when I showed you in the last episode about the NIH has been spending all this money. It's actually closer to the tune of about $7 million. And it was putting all that money into the Wuhan lab, and it was going specifically towards the bat lady right here. Remember this scene? That then Peter Daszak and the Eco Health Alliance at the NIH, he's trying to cover his butt by getting into an interview as a source like all these other PhDs. And that's the thing. So the PhDs are trying to cover their butt because they're screwing around with things that they shouldn't be screwing around with. And so they're willing, instead of just coming out and say, you know what, there's some things we shouldn't be working on, like a bat virus, and not only not working on it, but working on it in the way that they were working on it at the Wuhan lab. And I'll show you what they were doing. So show me the money. Oh, yeah, what is the NIH? I mean, what, $30 million? Think about that. $30 billion of tax money goes into the biomedical research each year. That's the drug companies, pharmaceuticals. And think about this. Do you know how much of a boom it was? Remember the photographs of the concentration camps? Dr. Mengele? You know, remember that documentation? You ever heard of the CIA's Operation Paperclip? So all these guys came back and, like, you know, Werner von Braun became like the father of NASA and the space program. Well, there was also a bunch of information that was brought back, research that the Nazis were able to do on the concentration camp prisoners, because they had no laws against this. Kind of like, what, in China where they harvest organs? Do you think they just harvest organs? Or do you also think that maybe they also allow their doctors to use their prisoners, just like the Nazis did, to trial various pharmaceuticals? Oh, wow. So now we've got major international corporations. Could that be like Bayer and who are these other drug companies in the United States, that they're allowed with your and my tax dollars to get a contract with a lab in China to come up with a pharmaceutical that then, because we could never do that kind of testing in the United States, but the CCP has no problem about doing that with its own citizens, especially when they get into the prison system in China. That maybe all that research is being done and we're paying for it. Think about it. We're paying for labs and places like the CCP so that they can probably kill people, because if that drug doesn't work properly, you think that person's going to come back? They're at least going to be scarred. They're at least going to be, I don't know, crippled. Who knows? I mean, we've had our own issues. I remember back in high school, I had an English teacher when they did the flu vaccine. How many of you are old enough to remember when the first older people got the flu vaccine and they were crippled by it? Do you remember that? I remember it. And then when I started seeing how like the flu vaccine that we get now often isn't set up to hit the coming flu season because it's totally out of date, because the flu that comes up in the following year is already developed and changed and morphed. Kind of like, that's the thing about viruses. Viruses change. And since the COVID-19 is a virus, how much is it going to change? Since its original design, when it left, accidentally or purposely. I mean, people are even talking about, it could have been just a disgruntled lab worker, or the one that I actually think is more viable, having been raised in China, in Asia, and being very well at. I mean, shoot, come on, man. It's just like I've been in that culture. I always have friends because that's part of my culture. I'm actually. There's an old saying I used to say. It's like, a lot of my friends who are Chinese say, man, you're more Chinese than I am. And the reason is because I was raised over there. I accept it. I understand it. What I have problems with is the CCP. That's the most thing, because the CCP is like the correlation of the worst qualities of the Chinese culture just wrapped up in one political movement. And it's all about staying in power. And the Chinese people are at the mercy of this monster. And that's what I find disgusting. But it's just the idea. And this is the thing about it. It's just like, could it have been some lab worker who says, hey, God, they're paying me crap at this lab. But you know what? When they're done working on these bats, maybe I can throw them in the bag and take them out. And people say, oh, no, everything's controlled at these labs, right? Well, we found out, if you've read about Fort Detrick, even in our bioweapon lab, it's still bringing up the question of Lyme disease. Remember Lyme disease? Ever thought about Lyme disease? I'm actually having more questions about Ebola, because it's kind of like with that movie Outbreak. Oh, it's fiction. It's science fiction. But if you think about how these diseases have appeared and come out and then disappeared, never to be heard from again, or they come out and it's just really minuscule, but you have these major outbreaks. How does it come out as an outbreak? Okay. And how you got this situation right now? Because, with Lyme disease, you never heard about Lyme disease. And then suddenly, here I am in California in the 80s, and I'm terrified I've got Lyme disease because I'm deer hunting in Northern California. And I started hearing, it was like the mid 90s. Is when people were complaining that, I got Lyme disease in Northern California, because I got it from a tick up there. And you never heard of it. And even in the East, you never heard about Lyme disease. And suddenly it just spread like wildfire. How does it spread like wildfire? Well, some people are saying, it got onto a tick at Fort Detrick, and then it got across, and then it got on the mainland. And once it got on the mainland, it was a wildfire. And that's the thing about this. How did it get out? Did it leak out because it got on, quote, patient zero? We're still trying to find patient zero. And they've used a name, and they can't find this woman. She's gone. And they think she was patient zero. Okay. The other one is, it was just a guy where, somebody working at the lab saying, hey, I can make extra cash if I can sell these bats down at the market. And these were bats that were supposed to be cremated. So instead, he takes it down. Understanding business in China, I would have thought, probably that's what happened. That makes more sense. So think about that. The bat lady. And how she could come up with something like this. And how she could work on this. And if you look around, you'll find out all of her publishing. Because remember what I said. To have tenure in all universities, and especially in the United States, publish or die is the old saying. Publish or die. It's all documented. Yeah. Oh, man. Before and then when they started to really realize that it was no longer natural. And then you got leakage. The famous photograph that people look at and say, whoa, look at that. It's just leaking out of there. Such great controls. You know, Daszak talking about it. Echo Health Lab. Oh, yeah, you know, in China at the Wuhan lab. And my friend, Xi Jinping, I mean, I highly respect her. Yes, because they're on top of it over there. Totally on top of it over there. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't think they're that on top of it. And that's why that photograph that you just saw, that's why they quickly removed it from the China Daily. Which is, yeah. Okay, so this is the one I was talking about, okay? Here is the evolutionary relationship of the taxonomy. Okay, so here I was saying, how in the world does that one appear right there? Okay, the one with the arrow pointing at it. See, so that's the one that contains the furin-specific cleavage sites, and those are the ones that enable it to the corona. Have you seen pictures of the corona? Let's go back. Here's another one. Where is the picture of the corona? Oh, they actually had a picture of it here. And there it is. See that one right there? So that's called corona, like, you know, in la corona in Spanish, you know, the crown. So those crowns, based on what they are in the genomes and everything, that's how the furin cleavage, they're able to connect to your body or not, depending on mutuality, right? Okay. So mutuality, okay, it takes a while. It takes, as I said, thousands of years, 1,000 minimum in order to that develop. But here's the thing that's very interesting. Okay, now this was a paper that was done. Evidence of recombination in coronaviruses implicating pangolin origins of the COVID-19. Okay, I mean, you can search this up. I'll have links at if you're subscribed, and I please do subscribe over to my channel at YouTube. You know, please subscribe over to the channel at YouTube, and it's Treasure Quest Snake Island, the real story. Just type that in over at YouTube, and you'll get when this goes up as a new video over there, a new episode over there, because this is live right now. You'll get a notification, and then just click on the arrow. It'll drop it, and it'll have all the links that you can follow on your own and go read on your own, and it'll blow you away. I mean, so here's that summary. It's basically a novel coronavirus, COVID-19, was the cause of an outbreak of respiratory illness detected in Wuhan, Hubei province, China, in December of 2019. October 2019, as we've seen with the cell phone traffic. Genomic analyses of COVID 2019 determined a 96% resemblance with a coronavirus isolated from a bat in 2013, RATG13. However, the receptor binding motif, the RBM, of these two genomes share low sequence similarity. This is very important. Okay, so they're saying, oh, well, that was the bat that they had. You know, that's got the SARS coronavirus. But that's not the SARS COVID. That's not the SARS coronavirus 2. When it has the 2 on it, that's the one we're dealing with right now. That's the COVID-19. Okay? And that's what they're saying here. These two genomes share low sequence similarity. This divergence suggests a possible alternative source for the RBM coding sequence in COVID 2019. We identified high sequence similarity in the RBM between COVID-19 and coronavirus genome reconstructed from a viral metagenomic data set from pangolins, possibly indicating a more complex origin. More complex origin. That says the complexity is a lab. Okay, so here, let's look at that. So, because remember, they were saying, oh, it's the pangolins, because it's, and who was talking about? Yeah, Peter Daszak, and the politically correct, oh, it's protecting the environment. It has nothing to protecting the environment. It's about getting money from the United States, our tax dollars, so that they can go and spend it on these programs that they shouldn't be screwing around with in the first place. And how are they screwing around with? Okay, that right there. Let's look at the square or the rectangle. Multiple alignment at the amino acid level of PRRA, insertion region, and flanking areas across 3 coronavirus genomes relative to the outbreak strain coronavirus 2019. Box show the PRRA insertion present in the COVID 2019 and missing in all the 3 other COVID. Okay. Pangolin. They were saying, oh no, the people were getting it. That's the reason. It's like a little mix between the original, SARS coronavirus, and then the original. There's the other, which is an original prior. So that's making me question the idea: where did the SARS coronavirus original come from? People should be asking about that, because the variations RSVAS, QS, RST, SOKA, different. Going up here, pangolin versus the SARS coronavirus original. Is that right? Yeah, that's it, right? So RSV, SXA, and the RSVA, SQS. Okay. Variants right there with the Q and the X. Okay. And the S and the A. But here, this is the thing. This is the splice, and this is the stuff that the bat lady was doing. She was taking it, and she was splicing in the quality, the capability for it to be not so virulent, not so deadly. To be so deadly. And also, most importantly, the idea that it could bond to human beings. That's screwing around with it so it could actually connect. So they took something that couldn't really connect to us as efficiently and really couldn't, and then they put that in there so it could. Yeah, that's the bull crap. Totally. When they keep on saying it's naturally occurring. Peter Daszak, Dr. Fauci, everybody. Osterholm, yeah, man, you need to go back to school. Because evidently, they didn't teach you right. Either you're freaking lying or you really didn't get your smarts correctly. Did you lie on a test? I don't know. Who knows? So, CCP, PLA hiding evidence at the cost to the world. And this is the thing about it. Remember what I said about oh yeah, we screwed up, if they're a friend, if China's a friend of the United States and the free world, well, we screwed up, and we're sorry about it, but we were just trying to do something good. Yeah, egotistically, we were just trying to make China the first one, to find out the cure for SARS coronavirus, the first, or find a cure for AIDS. But instead, China deliberately destroyed the laboratory evidence and then made the whistleblowers disappear. Where are these people? We want to talk to these people who worked in the lab. They're gone. Even their web pages disappear. The only way you get them is you get a screenshot that somebody else had put up. It's just wild. And people are like, well, what do you mean? I'm just like, they weren't trying to get us. Well, originally they may not have been trying to get us, even though the PLA is always working on something alongside the civilian lab. Again, 3 men make a tiger. And that's what this is all about. That's why they went into Italy and they brought in all the equipment to try and help Italy so that Italy would say, oh, thank you for all this equipment. Thank you, China. So then when somebody goes back to him and says, do you believe that, China actually created this and it was a bioweapon? Italy would say, no. Plus, Italy is a socialist government. And that's actually one of the reasons that they were so screwed up in terms of how everything was able to just continue to go on. Because Italy was just saying, it's fine. We don't have any problems. China would never do this to us. We have all these Chinese workers in they wouldn't do that to their own Chinese people, right? Nah, yeah, they would. And this is why I am still wondering. Because you saw how many people had died. How many people died at Pearl Harbor before we went to war with Japan? And that's a big question. Why are we not already at war? Kinetic war with China, with CCP. Because they're winning every other way. Let's go back to that. Right here. Where is it? Oh, yes. Let's go back to reading all about Unrestricted warfare, alternative methods of attack, reducing one's opponent. The book notes can be accomplished in a number of ways other than direct military confrontation. They are winning. They are constantly winning on this. And it's like people, even like Steve Bannon, is like, well, oh God, if we go to kinetic war. Well, you know what? They're winning. And if you don't get a kinetic war, they will continue to win. You'll do exactly what they don't want us to do. They don't want us to go to kinetic war. They don't want us to go to kinetic war because they will lose. And especially if you target something, which I'm going to be talking about in a sec, which is the center of gravity. And that's actually Beijing. And why is that? Because Beijing is the forbidden city. And people have told me, oh my God, how could you even think that way? How could you even think about a nuclear bomb going dead center into the forbidden city? Why is it the forbidden city, the center of gravity, the forbidden city? Why is it? The definition of the center of gravity is a source of power that provides moral or physical strength, freedom of action, or will to act. Who was the center of gravity for the Nazis during World War II? Adolf Hitler. It wasn't the Nazi party. It wasn't the Nazi army. It wasn't the German army. It was Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was gone. That truly was. He said, oh, it's going to last for 1,000 years. It didn't freaking last that long at all, did it? You know, because Adolf Hitler was gone. And for Japan, who was, see, for the U.S., the center of gravity is the U.S. Constitution. You ever wondered about that? It's not the state capitol. How many times has this capitol been attacked? Well, it's been attacked once. How many times has it moved? Let's see. I think it was, New York, Philadelphia, and then Washington, D.C. That's moved. So the U.S. center of gravity is actually, this is what everything revolves around, is the Constitution. And think about this. What are the enemies of the United States attacking the most? The U.S. Constitution. They're destroying the U.S. Constitution. That's why they're doing things like they're doing in all the blue states right now, right? They're destroying your First Amendment rights. They're destroying your Second Amendment rights. That's what they're doing, and they're doing it piecemeal. They're fighting the battle of 1,000 lashes. They're fighting the battle of 1,000 swords. They're coming in, and they're taking piece by piece by piece from all of us. All of us. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment. Soon you won't even be able to say no. I call the Fifth. No, you'll have to do it or they'll put you on the rack, right? That's how that works. That's what they're doing, and that's what they're doing in every state that they can get into, removing all of our rights in the United States. And if they can do that in other countries that are willing to be bought off by them, that's what they're doing. And in the same way, think about what's happening with the Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party that John F. Kennedy. My haircut. When I get a haircut, you know what I get? I get kind of like the same haircut I've always gotten, which is a Navy regulation haircut. You know what haircut that was? I got that as a kid. You know why? Because everybody as a kid during that time had parents who believed, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country, right? So I had the John F. Kennedy haircut. I still kind of have the John hair with whatever hair is left on me. But that's the haircut I go to. It's a Navy reg haircut. High and tight. Okay. So the thing about it is the idea that John F. Kennedy, this is the way the left is succeeding. They're using the ghosts of people who would be enemies of the very front that has infected the Democratic Party, which is the socialist communist movement. The Communist Party of the United States and the socialists of the United States have overtaken the Democratic Party. And they use the ghost of John F. Kennedy and the ghost of Martin Luther King to whichever side they want to. And while they're doing that, they're destroying the very document that created this country and defined this country. If you look at the rights that we've been losing repeatedly, year after year, and who are the ones who are going after it the most? The left. Because they know once they get rid of them, then We will be 100% socialist. Right now, we are already socialists. That's what I'm saying. We are already socialists. Look at the programs we have in this country. We have they say it's a social program. But if it's a social program, we've had social programs before. Social programs is like, I would like to provide for you. That's a social program. A socialist program is, no, we're going to take your money and you have no say about it, and we're going to give it to somebody. So that can be somebody that should be actually working and doing something instead of just getting free money and being paid not to work. And think about that. They talk about, oh, well, you know, why are people not going back to work? Because think about it. What if their job was not paying them as much as they were getting? You know, for most people, you can't live on the $1,200 that they were giving out. But think about the people who would think that's actually a raise. Are they going to go back to work? Hell no. Remember, human behavior, propensity to do. So, what is the center? And think about it. Perfectly right there. It was never Mao Zedong. Well, it kind of was Mao Zedong initially for the revolution. But see, the revolution is over. It is now truly the hardened CCP, the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party. They are, and the symbolism of that is right up there on the second floor of that palace above Mao Zedong's head. And that's the symbol of the CCP. Now, if you blow up the Forbidden City, here's the thing about it. You remove it. He said, oh my God, what are you thinking about? It's like, I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. I mean, God. Well, see, they're doing it to us. You've seen the statues being destroyed. See, remember before they were just pulling down statues of Confederates because it's, oh, well, that's the symbolism of the slavery of the United States. But then suddenly in the last 3 weeks, you notice that they're pulling down statues of Abraham Lincoln and of abolitionists who were against slavery and of George Washington and wrapping it in an American flag and burning that flag. Think about that. They're doing it to us already. They are destroying symbolisms, architectures, history. They're destroying our history. So if we were to nuke the Forbidden City, are we doing anything less than what they're doing piecemeal to us in the United States? Think about that. I'm trying to ask you to ask questions. Think about this. I'm not telling you to believe what I believe. I'm asking you to ask questions. Why are they repeatedly destroying piece by piece? Because it's easier to do it piece by piece. And that's how effective the CCP has been, because the CCP, in contrast to the way the United States has become, see, back in the 60s, and even up into the 70s, we thought about generations after. We thought about what would the United States be in the future. After World War II, 1946, 1964, the years that I'm going to be talking about, those were the high years, okay? That was the first turning. I'm going to be talking about a book and an idea called turnings, the four turnings. And in the United States, we have 4 turnings, and it's gone back all the way to 1749, going all the way back to the French and Indian Wars and how those developed and how those changed. Did you know that there's actually a correlation between the French and Indian Wars and the wars that we've had in Afghanistan and in Iraq? I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. But right now, it's like looking at how we used to think in terms of decades and even hundreds of years. And even in the 30s, they had drawings depicting what it was going to be like in 1990. You know, where we'd be all flying around in our own, like, airplane cars, you know, or spaceship cars. And you could just, like, drive out of your house and then fly into the air, right? Well, not everybody has that, do we? So all these visions and dreams have been dropped. In China, though, the CCP has always continued on the idea of one thing, and that is the CCP is always in control. Again, remember, it's the dynasty. And the symbolism of the CCP as just another imperial dynasty, and that China, like the British Empire before it would always have the sun revolving around and never set on the empire of the Chinese Communist Party. The symbolism, the center of that, the center of gravity is the Forbidden City. Think about that. Again, asking you to ask questions. Why have we not nuked it? Because if you nuke it, you remove it. And then you rewrite the history. Frankly, I think a very peaceful capital for China would be Shanghai. It would be in business. The Chinese people would be successful. You'd remove all the politicians and all the oligarchs and all these people who have been basically running China and been very successful in conquering these other countries using economics. And it all revolves around the Forbidden City. And that's why it was forbidden. That's why it's called the Forbidden City, because you're not allowed to go there, because that's where the Wizard of Oz lives for China in the psychology of the CCP. That's where all the secrets hide psychologically for the CCP, is in the symbolism of the Forbidden City. And why? See, that's the thing. We've gotten to this point where we could have taken out Mao years ago. You know, if we listened to MacArthur years ago, yeah, he was going to use a nuke back then too. He was ready to use nukes, and Truman pulled him off. That was the reason he pulled him off. It's because he was going to use a nuke against Mao. And if he'd taken out Mao, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. We wouldn't have to be dealing with the CCP. Okay? And what did he do before? This picture defines what he did with removing, right? Remember I told you about removing? So the center of gravity for Nazi Germany was Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, but specifically Adolf Hitler, because he was like a god. In the same way for the Japanese, Hirohito, more peacefully, was actually removed as the demigod for the Japanese people. And by doing that, have we been at war with Japan since then? No. Not in the way that the Chinese have been, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Because the Chinese Communist Party, it revolves around them. They have the power, but physically to remove something is the Forbidden City. In the same way that when Hirohito was removed as the emperor, MacArthur had removed the center of gravity for Japan, to the point that when MacArthur left, after all that restructuring, after all bringing in the money, and that's the thing, we were trying to do that with the CCP, but the CCP had not stopped being an enemy. See? It's the difference between still dealing with the Soviet Union, giving the Soviet Union money before the Soviet Union collapsed and imploded on itself. Okay? But that's what we ended up doing with the CCP, and all we did was embolden and strengthen our direct enemy. We never did that with the Soviet Union. Then why did we do it with the Chinese Communist Party? They're the same exact thing. Soviet Union's gone. We only deal with Putin right now, and that's an issue because he's joining up with the CCP, but they're vehemently enemies, and hopefully Trump and the administration will be playing on that. So here, let's talk about my background in terms of like fighting communism. So I'm not talking like a lot of these guys talk about, you know, like, oh, well, I was a campaign manager for Trump and I was like the representative to the UN, and so I understand, you know, what's really happening. No, if you haven't been in the mud and you haven't had to fight and you haven't been shot at and you haven't been shooting back, you have no idea about what you're talking about in dealing with the communists. The only people who should be talking about what it's like to deal with the communists, those like me, who have been in prison in a communist country, who have fought in a communist front. And what did I do? Oh, I participated in a variety of things. I did arms smuggling interdiction. So it was interdiction against the Sandinistas. And so here I am on a piranha. And the piranha, it was used, it had a 50 caliber on the front, 2 M60s on the back. We also had laws, and we had M79s and M203s. And we used those to go against bigger boats. And so we had these squadrons, and these boats would come in that we were on, and we would go and attack the Sandinistas as they brought in on their bigger ships all these arms and ammunition that had been purchased by Fidel Castro from Vietnam, that we'd left in Vietnam at the end of the war, were shipped across to Nicaragua, and then Nicaragua would smuggle them across to the FMLN that we were fighting directly in El Salvador. This is the thing about communists. That's why I say communists are communists. The idea of using one against the other, yeah, we tried that with China, right? And that was successful during the Vietnam War. But then the Vietnam War was over. And then we had to deal with China. But we didn't deal with China. We just made them stronger. We paid them off, and now they became a bigger enemy. And now we are where we are right now. The other stuff I used to deal with is pseudo operations. So here's how I got to really understand communists, because 50% of our teams were defecting FMLN. How did that work? Yeah, this was during the time of Ed Corr, who was the ambassador, and then Ambassador Bill Walker. Oh yeah, they don't like to talk about that, because there was another thing that came out was called Iran-Contra. Yeah, remember that? That wasn't good. So everything went quiet. That's why when you get your American history as compared to my American history goes in terms of wars that the United States fought in the Cold War. It goes from Korea to Vietnam to Central America to Afghanistan. And then the next war after that is Desert Storm. But when you get your book says, this is the American leftist book, it says Vietnam, and it skips all the way over to ka-ching, Desert Storm. Interesting, huh? Especially considering how many Americans got killed in Central America and Latin America fighting against communism, and also our allies like the Argentines who are helping us. Go Google Operación Charlie, otherwise known as Operation Charlie. That was the program that was set up with Argentina, because they are already dealing with the communists in their country. And by the way, these were the same communists. Was it the Montaneros? Yeah, they were the ones that actually went off and assassinated Somoza when he was down there. Yeah. So there's the free world, and then there's the communist world. And they're all unified against the free world. That's why when people say, well, Vietnam's different. Vietnam's not different. It's communist. Cuba. Raul Castro. Raul Castro is the guy who was the architect for everything that was happening in Central America. Not Fidel. Raul Castro was the architect for everything that was happening. Because, like soulmate, the real soulmate of Che Guevara, Ernesto, was not Fidel Castro. It was Raul. They were younger, and they understood each other, and they were the real zealots, the real radicals, the ideologues, right? So when Che died and was killed in Bolivia, Raul kept carrying the torch, and that's why things continued to happen. And then they fought the war, we fought the war, we won the war, and then Fidel realized he couldn't go any further. So, just like with the Chinese, he learned how to use money and economics. So that's how Fidel Castro was able to succeed with paying for the campaign of Lula in Brazil, and able to pay for the campaign by Chavez in Venezuela, and also Correa in Ecuador, and with the FMLN getting back in, and I mean getting in totally, to the point that it is right now that China, El Salvador, as far as I'm concerned, they're the same, sadly. So all the blood that was spilled in Central America went to naught because the FMLN's there, and Ortega, the pedophile himself, by his own stepdaughter's admission, but nobody listens to her because that's against the agenda. So the leftist media never listens to the stepdaughter who was talking all about how many times that Daniel Ortega was raping her as a minor because, hey, he's part of the Sandinista movement. And everybody had this romanticized Ambrose Pierce fascination with revolutions in Latin America, as though those are the answers to them. The idea that that's how things are going to change, and it never changes. All that happens is different power, same crap. And that is the subjugation of the citizens and the people happening in China and they're trying to push it around the world. And they're working it pretty well in places like Seattle, where you've got this Chaz. Now it's the CHOP. So the CHOP is this twisted mix between the Maoist revolution and the French Revolution. And we're going to see how that turns out. So, understanding these guys, I fought alongside them because we had defectors. We had to learn their tactics and techniques. We dressed as them. That's the pseudo operations. Very similar to what we used in Vietnam under the Kit Carson program, or the, was it the Choi Hu? Or no, I forget the Vietnamese term for it, but it was the Kit Carson's program that the Marines was heavily involved in. But hey, if you want to read any of my background on this, you're more than welcome to go get 2 issues of Skill Set Magazine. I wrote a little bit about it. What was my experience in the war in Central America? What was my experience in Vietnam in a re-education prison? Yeah, check that out. Skill Set Magazine. Some of these issues, you can order them right now. Get a copy. Hey, and if you want to read about more of my experiences that I've written about, so you want to be a reality TV star. So I'll show you how the media has been becoming your enemy through the reality TV industry, but actually through how the whole media has been twisted in a manner that I couldn't even imagine when I was actually working as a newsman. Before I realized that being a newsman was not the right way if you believed in your country, and the idea that the communists were actually being very successful by causing all this upheaval in the world. And then make them pay. That's a book that I wrote actually on civil defense, and I wrote it for the Baltics and places like in Estonia and all that. So, and then finally, Bamboo Chest. Go check that out. You can read about my prison experience and what that was like. And again, go check out the links that I'll be putting over at YouTube. And in order to get those, for next episode, we'll be talking about 5 Acres in Independence and the Fourth Turning. That'll be episode 24, and the Perfect Storm. Let me tell you, there's a little bit in here, and there's a little bit in that book. Go get those copies and read the book that I read, 15 years ago that said, hey, I think I better move back into the country. And I'm a city boy originally, but I said I should move into the country like my grandparents because of what's coming. Well, it's coming. So, subscribe over at YouTube, like and share. That's Treasure Quest Snake Island, the real story at YouTube. Build my numbers, please, because the more that you've got subscribed over there, then the more opportunity that I get to reach out, and I get to go and get more research for you to read and check out. So we'll end, and next episode might be tomorrow, it might be Monday, depends on how much work I got to do here on the homestead, because I have a working homestead, and I got to get all the food set up for this winter, and I hope you're doing the same too. Good luck, and good night.